A nearly 46-year-old mystery finally solved. A killer identified in the case of murdered teenager Carol Sue Klaber.
On June 5, 1976, a 16-year-old girl named Carol Sue Klaber was found strangled to death, leaving her family and the entire community of northern Kentucky in a state of shock and despair. Despite decades of investigation, the case remained unsolved with no leads or suspects, until new technology emerged that played a crucial role in solving this mystery. Who could have done this to Carol? And how did the killer evade justice for so long? Welcome back to Mysterious Hook, where we shed light on mysterious cases from across the country. Today, we'll delve into the mysterious case of Carol Sue Klaber, a 46-year-old cold case that was finally solved in 2022. But first, if you still haven't subscribed to our channel, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that bell icon as it motivates us to create more intriguing content for you. So without further ado, let's dive right into this mystery. Boone County is a county located in the U.S. state of Kentucky. The county was founded in 1798 and was named after frontiersman Daniel Boone. It is the fourth most populous county in Kentucky and is home of the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport, which serves as a major hub for the region. The county seat is located in Burlington, and the county is known for its historic sites, outdoor recreation areas, and strong agricultural industry. It was here, in Boone, that a tragic murder took place in 1976. In the picturesque state of Kentucky, nestled along the rolling hills and babbling brooks, a new life entered the world on November 28, 1959. Her parents, Daniel Henry Klaber and Betty Jane Meek Renaker, beamed with joy as they held their precious baby girl in their arms and named her Carol Sue Klaber. Her older brother Thomas Klaber looked on with wonder, eager to welcome his new sister into the family fold. Carol had a great sense of humor. She was extremely modest for a teenager and had a lot of empathy for underprivileged people. She was a volunteer at St. Charles Nursing Home at the age of 16. Carol had also been a Brownie and Girl Scout in her younger days. She enjoyed cooking, sewing, playing records, and was always into music. At the age of 5, her piano lessons also started. Carol was also learning violin, and she had been chosen by her piano teacher, Hattie Schatzman, to represent her students at the Ohio Music Teacher Association. Carol played twice at the Taft Museum. Her passion for music and natural talent made her a beloved member of the Dixie Heights High School String Ensemble, and her classmates were drawn to her outgoing and kind personality. On June 5, 1976, the sun shone brightly over the quaint town of Union, Kentucky, as the residents began their day like any other. Dr. Gaines Huey, a well-regarded dentist from Walton, left his house early to make his way to work, ready to tend to his patients' dental needs. As he was driving down Chambers Road, he noticed something out of the ordinary at the edge of the road. With curiosity, he pulled over and walked towards the object. It was only when he got close he realized what he had found: a body, lying eerily still next to a culvert that served as a drain pipe for rainwater. In a state of shock and with trembling hands, he called the Kentucky State Police. Trooper Jan Wushner happened to be on duty that day. Wushner, a seasoned investigator who had previously served with the Boone County Sheriff's Department, quickly rushed to the scene to unravel the mystery of the lifeless body lying by the roadside. The detectives from the Walton State Police Department arrived at the crime scene at around 7:15 a.m., their eyes scanning the area with an acute attention to detail. As the detectives began their investigation, they noticed the telltale signs of a struggle. Broken twigs and trampled grass hinted at a violent scuffle, and a few feet away was the body of the victim, with injuries betraying she had been attacked and strangled. With a growing sense of dread, the investigators came to the grim realization that this was not a random act of violence, but a deliberate and calculated murder. The investigators were determined to leave no stone unturned in their quest for justice. But despite their best efforts, they couldn't find any concrete evidence at the crime scene. Frustrated at the loss, they decided to turn to the body of the victim for answers. Her body was sent to the county's medical examiner's lab for a thorough autopsy. The medical examiner performed a painstaking autopsy, carefully analyzing every inch of the victim's body for clues. Every cut, bruise, and wound was carefully documented, and every clue analyzed with precision. The results of the autopsy revealed the brutal truth of her death. The evidence suggested that she had been subjected to a vicious beating, her body bearing the telltale signs of a tire iron used with unrelenting force. The once beautiful face was now distorted with bruising and swelling, and the examiner noted the deep lacerations on her scalp, likely caused by a blunt object. The crushing blow to her head had caused irreparable damage, leading to her tragic and untimely demise. The signs of abuse and brutal physical trauma were also evident. It was a heartbreaking moment for all involved, as the cause of death was ultimately determined to be asphyxia caused by manual strangulation and blunt force trauma to the head. The discovery of such viciousness added a new level of urgency to the investigation. While analyzing the evidence found at the scene, they discovered some traces of foreign DNA on the victim's clothing. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to match it to anyone known at the time. With the hope of technological advancements in the future, they carefully preserved the evidence, knowing that one day it might lead to a breakthrough in the case. Through their tireless efforts, detectives were able to locate one of the family members who was the brother of the victim, with the help of DNA that was extracted from her body. He summoned the courage to come and identify the body. With heavy steps, Thomas Klaber, who was 23 years old at the time, walked into the morgue. As he gazed upon the still and lifeless form of his beloved sister, Carol Sue Klaber, on the cold metal table, tears streamed down his face. The pain in his heart was overwhelming as he realized that he would never again hear her infectious laugh or see her dazzling smile. With the investigation progressing, the investigators didn't leave any stone unturned. They combed through the community, knocking on doors, speaking to residents, and gathering any information that could provide insight into the tragic incident. They also delved deep into Carol Sue Klaber's past, talking to her family and friends to gain a deeper understanding of her life and any possible enemies. The investigators learned that June 4, 1976 was an ordinary day for the Klaber family. Carol Sue Klaber, a 16-year-old carefree teenager, hopped onto her bike and rode around town with the wind in her hair and a smile on her face. She greeted the locals, chatted with friends, and basked in the warmth of the summer day. Later in the evening, she plans to meet a friend at Zeno's Hyde Park restaurant. She left her home at 5:30 p.m. But as the sun began to set, a young man in a stylish Chevrolet Monte Carlo car accompanied Klaber to her home. According to one of the neighbors, she caught a glimpse of the young man, and he had sandy blonde hair, towering at an impressive 6 feet tall, with a slim figure. They exchanged a few words before Carol went inside the house, leaving the man waiting eagerly outside. Minutes later, Carol emerged from the house and got into the car and drove away with the man. It was the last time anyone would see Carol alive. Despite exhaustive efforts by investigators to track down the owners of the suspected vehicles in the town, the murder case of Carol Sue Klaber remained unsolved. The leads had dried up, and the case had hit a brick wall, leaving investigators scratching their heads. Eventually, the case went cold, and would stay like that for over 40 years. After years of darkness, a glimmer of hope emerged in the investigation of Carol Sue Klaber's murder. In 2017, two cold case detectives from the Boone County Sheriff's Office, Coy Cox and Tim Adams, breathed new life into the case. Their relentless pursuit of truth and justice for Carol Sue Klaber led them to join forces with the original detective on the case, Jerry Keith, who had kept the case close to his heart even after retirement. The trio worked tirelessly. With modern technology, they meticulously combed through the old evidence, interviewing witnesses, and sifting through leads to piece together a new perspective on the tragedy that had stumped them for years. They began their investigation by exploring the two prime suspects that Keith had identified earlier. The first suspect was a man who had a track record of car theft and whose vehicle bore an eerie resemblance to the one Carol was last seen in. The detectives set their sights on this man and subjected him to intense scrutiny, hoping to extract any valuable information from him. Despite being a suspect in the investigation, the man denied having any connection to the murder of Carol. He opened up to the detectives, revealing his past misdeeds, but remained steadfast in his claim of innocence in Carol's murder. So the detectives collected his DNA for testing with the DNA that was found in 1976 from the victim's clothing. After the tense wait for the DNA analysis to be completed, the results came in December 2018. And Cox and Adams finally made the call to the man. He was no longer a suspect in Carol's murder as his DNA had come back as negative. The weight of the world lifted off his shoulders as he realized he could finally breathe easy and start anew. After this, Cox and Adams turned their attention back to their tireless pursuit of the killer. The leads on their first suspect had dried up, and they were back to square one. But then in 2020, they decided to move to their second suspect, who had previously been convicted of a brutal sexual assault in the same area just 2 years after Carol's murder in 1978. His name was Michael Dean Tate, and he was now 77 years old in 2020. As Cox and Adams worked to build their case against Michael Dean Tate, they reached out to his victim in the 1978 assault for her account of the attack. Although her name remained confidential, her recollection of the night was vivid. She described the eerie darkness of the night in Park Hills on October 1, 1978, when she was brutally attacked in her own garage at around 2 a.m. The victim recalled how she screamed and fought with all her might, but her attacker seemed to have a sick pleasure in inflicting pain. However, after 2 hours of hell, the assailant left her bleeding and broken, but alive. It took years for her to recover from the physical and emotional scars that Tate had left with her on that dark and fateful night. With the discovery of Tate's connection to the 1978 case, Cox and Adams could not ignore the possibility that he may have been involved in Carol's murder. Tate's frequent travels to the area for work in the 1970s and 1980s in the same time frame as Carol's murder made him a strong suspect for investigation. However, even with mounting evidence against him, Tate maintained his innocence and denied any involvement in Carol's death. The detectives had been hopeful that their investigation would finally lead them to the culprit. However, their hopes were soon dashed when the DNA analysis did not match Tate's DNA. In addition, court documents revealed that Tate had been living in Cincinnati in 1976, making it impossible for him to have committed the crime. The detectives wondered if they would ever be able to bring closure to this decades-old mystery, as it once again went dormant. For nearly half a century, the case remained shrouded in mystery. But on September 17, 2022, the Boone County Sheriff's Office reached out to the experts at Othram Lab. Due to their expertise in genetic genealogy, the Othram team was contacted to work on this case. With funding provided by the Season of Justice, the Kentucky State Police Central Forensic Center sent Othram Labs a DNA sample extracted from the 1976 crime scene. Using advanced forensic-grade genome sequencing, Othram's skilled scientists were able to construct a complete DNA profile for the elusive suspect. Their cutting-edge technology allowed them to unlock valuable genetic information that had been hidden for decades. Othram Labs genealogy experts used forensic genetic genealogy to generate investigative leads based on the comprehensive DNA profile they had constructed. In a stunning turn of events, Othram Labs delivered an answer in less than 2 months after receiving the DNA samples on November 25, 2022. By analyzing the genetic information left by the killer, they discovered a connection to a man named Thomas W. Dunaway, who had passed away in 1990 at the age of 33. It was revealed that Dunaway had a son who had grown up without ever knowing his father. The detectives traveled to meet with the son of Thomas Dunaway, whose identity was kept confidential, to gather DNA samples for comparison. The results of these crucial laboratory tests would be the key to solving the mystery that had long evaded the grasp of law enforcement. With a determination to uncover the truth and an unshakable commitment to justice, they carefully collected the necessary samples. The long journey to solve the case finally came to an end on December 12, 2022. The use of advanced technology and the unwavering dedication of the detectives had brought justice to Carol Sue Klaber and her family after almost 46 years, when Dunaway's son's DNA partially matched the traces of DNA they had found on Carol's body all those many years ago. The process was not an easy one, but the persistence of those involved had paid off, resulting in a breakthrough that would bring closure to all those affected by the tragic events of 1976. The police never gave up on solving the murder case of Carol Sue Klaber. Thomas W. Dunaway, who was born on May 20, 1957, and was 19 years old at the time, managed to stay hidden for many years. Through their perseverance, they were able to uncover crucial information about Dunaway's past and the terrible things he had done. The police discovered that he lived near DeVal Park, the same place where Carol was last seen with a man who looked like him. As they delved deeper, more damning evidence against Dunaway emerged. Dunaway was not just a once-off criminal. He had been on a 6-month crime spree, leaving a trail of evidence behind in the form of the cars he used to escape each crime scene. The horror did not stop with Carol Sue Klaber's death, as he was found guilty of another killing just 6 months later in December 1976. Ronald Townsend, just 19 years old, was found lying on the ground, lifeless and bullet-ridden. The community was devastated by the loss, but their spirits were lifted when Thomas Dunaway, the perpetrator behind Townsend's murder, was caught and admitted to his crimes. He was handed a life sentence. But unfortunately, Dunaway was released in 1984 after serving only 7.5 years in prison. The question remains, was justice served? Or was it just a fleeting illusion? It was Detective Coy Cox who uncovered the chilling pattern of violence and darkness that consumed Dunaway's life. Although justice may not have been served for Carol's murder, the police managed to expose the full extent of Dunaway's dangerous and deadly reign of terror. The murders of Carol Sue Klaber and Ronald Townsend shared something disturbingly similar. Both victims were left in plain sight just inches away from the road, as if the killer wanted to make a statement. As the investigation progressed, authorities uncovered a troubling fact about Dunaway, that he was absent without leave, or AWOL, from the Army when Townsend was murdered. Dunaway had enlisted in the military only 9 days after Carol's death, and was initially stationed at Fort Knox before being transferred to Fort Carson in Colorado. Despite being enlisted in the military, Thomas Dunaway couldn't seem to stay out of trouble. Dunaway had a passion for cars that was unmatched, but it ultimately led to his downfall. With a keen eye for a good deal, he traded in his beloved 1973 Chevrolet Monte Carlo for an eye-catching orange Chevrolet Vega. However, little did he know that this flashy car would be the very thing that caught the attention of detectives investigating Ronald Townsend's murder. The detectives relentlessly pursued Dunaway, issuing an all-points bulletin for him and his orange Vega. It was a game of cat and mouse that finally came to an end on the dark Christmas Eve of 1976, when Dunaway was arrested in South Carolina on charges of Townsend's murder and illegal possession of a firearm. As investigators delved deeper into the puzzling case of Carol Sue Klaber's murder, they were stumped by the bond between her and Thomas Dunaway. Though they may have crossed paths during their formative years in the Erlanger-Elsmer Schools District, it was unclear how they became connected later in life. But amidst the confusion, Detective Coy Cox delivered a significant clue that could unravel the mystery. Carol's love for DeVal Park. This verdant oasis held a special place in Carol's heart, and it's possible that her affection for the park led her to a chance encounter with Dunaway. She was known to be outgoing, and it's possible that's how she met him. Perhaps they met by chance in the park, and their paths became intertwined as they shared stories and laughter in that peaceful setting. One thing is certain, the park is important to their connection, as Dunaway lived just a short distance away from where Carol used to ride her bike. The revelation of Thomas Dunaway as Carol Sue Klaber's killer brought a mix of relief and sorrow. While the case is considered closed by the authorities, the news that Dunaway passed away on December 28, 1990 at the young age of 33 left the family feeling conflicted. Despite knowing the truth, justice still feels elusive for the Klaber family. As Thomas Klaber lamented, he couldn't help but wonder what justice meant now, and wished he could have confronted Dunaway before his untimely death. The memory of Carol's murder has clung to her brother like a shadow. It's a weight that he's carried for almost half a century, never quite able to shake off the fear that another tragedy could strike his family. He worries endlessly about the safety of his son Daniel, who is 28 years old, even calling him late at night to check in. He fears losing anyone else dear to him, just like he lost his beloved sister. It's a fear that grips him tightly, like a vice, reminding him of the preciousness of every moment and the importance of cherishing those we love. For Thomas Klaber, the idea of disturbing his sister's final resting place was unbearable. The thought of disturbing her peaceful slumber just to catch her killer was a heavy burden on his heart. But thankfully, detectives found another way. Instead of exhuming Carol Sue's remains, they were able to exhume the body of her killer. While it may not be the justice that Thomas had hoped for, the fact that his sister's grave remains undisturbed has given him a small sense of solace. For Thomas, it's the small victories that count, and the knowledge that his sister can finally rest in peace. Detective Cox's determination in seeking justice knew no bounds, as evidenced by his recent court order to exhume Dunaway's body for DNA testing. The process of entering the DNA into CODIS may be just the beginning of a new chapter in the pursuit of justice, and Cox is ready to take on whatever challenges lie ahead. After almost half a century, justice was finally served for Carol Sue Klaber. Though her killer cannot be tried in a court of law, the Boone County Commonwealth's attorney, Lewis Kelly, has deemed the case closed. The news brought tears to Detective Cox's eyes as he shared the bittersweet moment of informing Carol's brother that the perpetrator had been identified after all these years. While the past cannot be undone, the closure that comes with knowing the truth is a small comfort in the face of such a tragedy. Detective Coy Cox and his team finally solved the 46-year-old mystery of Carol Sue Klaber's murder by identifying the perpetrator, Thomas W. Dunaway. This case highlights the dedication of law enforcement in pursuing justice for victims and their families, no matter how long it takes. What are your thoughts on this case? Share your opinions in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled for the next mystery to unfold.